Javanese folklore warns of Kliwon Tuesday, a day so spiritually volatile that a death in the family triggers a specific sequence of hauntings. Tradition holds that the spirit of the deceased returns in the dark, waiting in the threshold of the home to take loved ones with them. This superstition hangs over the Mulyanto family after the patriarch, a wealthy landowner, is killed in a freak accident. He steps into his shower on Kliwon Tuesday, just as an electrical short sends a lethal current through the water. The village head immediately intervenes, instructing the grieving family to perform a plate-breaking ritual. They must walk the village roads, shattering ceramics and scattering flowers to keep the curse at bay. The eldest son, Sessa, is a medical doctor who views these instructions as archaic nonsense. He refuses to participate, dismissing the cultural warnings as nothing more than grief-driven paranoia. In this cultural framework, ignoring the ritual removes the family's only perceived protection. By siding with logic over folklore, Sessa leaves the household entirely exposed to the events of the coming week. Within 48 hours, the remaining family members are targeted by a series of increasingly violent and precise incidents. The mother reports hearing her husband's voice calling her through the walls. Moments later, the heavy metal ceiling fan in her bedroom detaches, striking her with enough force to cause an instant, gruesome death. Sessa's scientific skepticism begins to crumble as he starts seeing the physical shapes of his dead parents standing in the corners of the house, watching him in silence. Terrified, Sessa flees to an abandoned clinic. He wakes up inside a morgue, chased by reanimated corpses, until he slips on the tile, falling face first onto a sharp metal protrusion that impales his skull. While the villagers point to the Kliwon Tuesday curse, these deaths are physically meticulous. A ceiling fan falling and a man slipping onto a spike are targeted accidents, suggesting a more grounded, intentional force is at work. With 3 family members dead, the 2 youngest siblings, Yanda and Nuri, begin looking for evidence that the village folklore has missed. Nuri discovers a photograph Sessa sent shortly before his death. It shows a small, hand-wrapped packet of dark soil he found hidden directly underneath the slats of his bed frame. They take the photo to a local shaman named Ma Sukma. She identifies the contents as morgue dirt, soil taken from a fresh grave, used as a focal point for a lethal black magic hex. This diagram shows the difference between the village superstition and the siblings' reality. In a natural haunting, the spirit of a loved one is the primary actor. In a directed curse, the morgue dirt acts as a beacon for a hostile entity. The figures Sessa saw weren't his parents. They were the entity mimicking his family to keep him terrified and vulnerable until the environment became lethal. This shifts the investigation away from the graveyard. For these packets to be planted under the beds, someone with intimate access to the house must be orchestrating the murders. To counter a hex built on morgue dirt, Ba Sukma prescribes a high-stakes Javanese ritual called Tapa Pandem. The ritual requires Yanda and Nuri to be buried alive in the earth. They must remain completely still, with only their heads exposed, breathing through the soil as the shaman completes the incantations. The spiritual mechanics of the Tapa Pandem rely on deception. By burying themselves, the siblings simulate their own deaths. This diagram illustrates the result. The hex hits a barrier of symbolic death and is forced backward. Tracing its own energy trail, it returns to seek out and strike the person who first planted the morgue dirt. Survival in this scenario requires the siblings to mirror the state of death. By becoming dead targets, they turn the assassin's weapon back on the shooter. As the Tapa Pandem concludes, the reflected curse finds its creators across the village. Uncle Suyono and his daughter Ajeng are both killed in sudden, violent accidents. Their deaths confirm that the family's own relatives were the ones who planted the morgue dirt. The motive is a long-standing land dispute. Mr. Mulyanto built his wealth by systematically stealing his brother Suyono's farmland and forcing his niece Ajeng into a life of servitude as a stable hand on her own family's property. Ajeng used her role as a servant to move through the house undetected, placing the hex packets directly under the family's pillows and bed frames. The family's downfall was not a matter of spiritual bad luck. It was the result of a brother's greed meeting a niece's desperate need for vengeance. Even with the motive revealed, Uncle Suyono was a destitute, broken farmer. He lacked the resources and the specialized knowledge required to perform a black magic ritual of this magnitude. A final mid-credits reveal shows the village heads secretly meeting with the shaman, Basukma. They celebrate the successful conclusion of the ritual together. This flowchart reveals the village head as the ultimate puppeteer. He provided the ritual instructions to the desperate uncle, knowing the wealthy brother would retaliate with a counter-curse. He designed a closed loop of violence, successfully eliminating both bloodlines. With the Mulyanto and Suyono families dead, the valuable, fertile farmland defaults to the local government. The village head now assumes total control over the property. While ghosts and folklore provide the atmosphere for this tragedy, the actual predator was a neighbor with a title and a map. In the end, human greed proved far more patient and lethal than any ancient curse.